Annual planning. We've all heard it. We've all heard everyone talk about how they just need to get it done and just need to check it off the list and move forward into doing all the things. But there's a lot more to it than that. And so we're here to dispel the myths, and we're going to rumble about what really needs to happen when we're digging into annual planning to make sure that it turns into what you need it to for your business. So, are we ready?
We're ready.
Let's dig in. Hello and welcome to Constructive Insights. Today we're digging into a really interesting topic. We're going to talk about annual planning and more specifically the myths and really the traps that a lot of teams fall into when it comes to looking at this type of exercise. And so I'm fortunate today to be joined by Kamila, our VP of Strategy. Kamila knows better than anybody about these kind of pitfalls and myths that surround teams when they approach this type of activity. And working with our building material clients, she's really been able to help a lot of teams kind of come out of these and see what they need to achieve in order to do some great annual planning. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. It's a topic that I'm really excited about. It's certainly top of mind for a lot of our clients and for a lot of our teams right now as we're digging into annual planning with our clients. And I'm sure it's what you're doing on your end as well, listener. So, myths and pitfalls and things like that are really kind of standing in the way of the teams, because when you start falling into those traps, you start looking at annual planning as something you have to check off your list instead of looking at it as the powerful tool that it can be for growth and for making an impact on your business. And so I'm excited to dig in.
And you're exactly right, Kamila. And so let's not wait any longer. Let's dig into the myths that we were talking about and share our thoughts on those. So the first myth that I know that we wanted to dig into is really about the fact that a lot of people look at plans as calendars of campaigns, of, what trade shows are we going to, how many emails are we putting out, how many news releases. It really becomes more of a schedule than a plan in itself wrapped around strategy, which is really not the right way to look at planning.
No, it's not. I mean, your annual plan should certainly not look like a buffet of activities and campaigns and things like that, or a laundry list of things, because then what you're missing is the strategy piece of it. And, annual planning, marketing planning, whatever you want to call it, should really be rooted in your business strategy. So at the onset, it's really important that whoever is leading the annual planning exercise and whoever they're involving understands what the organization is trying to achieve in the next, calendar year or in the next quarter or in the next, 2-3 years, however long that plan is meant to be developed for. And that's why one of the first things that we do with our clients is a strategic alignment session where we really dive into, what matters most to our business, what's happening in our industry, what's happening in our social political environment that could impact our annual plan, what are competitors doing, is there anything different with our audience? And we really dive into this with the leadership team and with, a cross-functional team from, sales and products and all of that great stuff, so that we understand, what is it that we want to achieve as a business. And once we have that understanding, only then can we start thinking about what is marketing going to do to support those business strategies.
Absolutely, because creating that in silo and not understanding what's happening with the industry, with competitors, and what your own customers demand is really, going to be a downfall of planning. And especially when you think of how brands grow, right? So your annual plan now is going to look very different than your annual plan 5 years ago or 5 years from now. You also can't take that cookie cutter approach of, we went to 5 trade shows last year. Let's bump that up. That's absolutely not the way to look at it. You really need to look at it at that point in time and where you are in the market and what you need to achieve from a strategy perspective.
100%.
And so I know another part of that is budget, right? Of course, we don't have endless budget, so that is often a driver of annual planning. But we also see a lot of brands, look at their budgets as evenly split. It needs to be put across all different types of tactics, and you need to see that even divide against brands, against products. And that is also a kind of misconception.
It is. And, we see this a lot, especially in an industry like building materials, where often the clients we work with have multi-brands underneath them. And a lot of these brands, have different audiences, different markets, different verticals, and things like that. And so they start thinking, well, we need to make all of our kids happy in the same way. It's not unlike parents who, try to make it really fair amongst all their children. Unfortunately, that's really working against us, especially if we start reminding ourselves that everything needs to be rooted in business strategy. It's impossible for us to say that every single one of these brands is going to contribute the same amount to our growth and make the same impact on our business. And so when we start thinking of it that way, that's when we can start allocating our resources, whether that be budget or people or time or things like that, accordingly to the impact that they're going to have against our business. We've actually seen this with a client recently where, as we were working through this annual planning exercise, we really started seeing one of the brands as being a key priority and really the key growth driver for their business in the next 2 to 3 years. And so we all agreed that that brand really deserved the majority of the budget, and that's what we did.
That's fantastic. And that's a hard decision to make. Like you said, it is like parenting, right? You don't want to break hearts, but it is a business decision. It is a strategy decision. And when it comes down to it, where are you going to see the most success and the most ROI when it comes to what you're putting out in market and the activities that you're doing? So yes, that does make a lot of sense. And that's a great example. So I think essentially what we're saying is if you're able to stop looking at your planning as a calendar and, look at your budgets differently, stop dividing evenly against what you're doing and start to align better with your strategy, find that focus, even find that alignment across your teams, that's when you're able to make those better bets when it comes to finding your short-term and long-term success for growth.
Yeah, and I think that's the turning point for any marketing team as well, where they, go beyond what they're typically doing, which is maybe a spreadsheet of tactics and budgets and things like that, and stop being seen as a support function in the business and really start being viewed as a growth driver for the business, a strategic partner.
Okay, so digging into myth number 2, planning is a one and done exercise.
I mean, I wish. Wouldn't that make our life so much easier, Jen? But of course, that is not the case. And I think we see this too often where, a plan is developed in January or whenever your fiscal year starts and never looked at again.
And then, of course, by spring, you're out of date already, right? Especially in this industry, we see a lot of changes even within a season. You've got changes to costs, raw material changes, regulation changes. You've got new competitors entering the market, new trends, new design trends, new needs of customers, new spending. There's a lot of things that can change in such a short period of time. It really, needs to be looked at constantly.
It is. And I mean, that's why an annual plan should really be treated as a living and breathing document. It's also why it's paired with things like monthly reporting, where, we look at what's working, what's not working kind of on an ongoing basis, but also business reviews. And I know business reviews is typically something that is looked at the business level. But as we talked earlier, annual planning and marketing planning is tied to your business and your business goals. And that's why, one of the things we do with our clients is those quarterly or biannual business review where we really look at the macro environment of the client and start thinking about, does this marketing plan still make sense, or are we marketing to a reality that doesn't really exist anymore?
Okay, so I'm going to pause you there. Let's talk about the difference between a monthly report and a period business review.
That's a great question. I think I briefly touched on it, but we think of monthly reporting as zooming in. So you really look at like the KPIs, the campaigns, the performance, how's creative performing, messaging, and you make those adjustments and those optimizations in real time on a monthly basis, or even on a daily basis in some of our clients' cases. The business review is really the idea of zooming out. You're looking at larger market shifts. You're taking another look at your business priorities and asking yourself, does that still make sense? Or maybe we've made an acquisition since we developed this plan and we need to relook at those priorities. And you ask yourself, what are those kind of bigger calls and bigger pivots that we need to make in order to address those kind of larger changes in our macro environment?
And so bringing all of that together when we're kind of looking from a monthly basis and we're looking from a business review basis, which are both so critically needed, I think what we're saying is, if you were to look at the end of the year and your plan is exactly the same as it was when you set it in January, you're not really doing it right.
No, you're really not.
So keep an eye on the market, make sure you're shifting with your business goals because we know your business will change and evolve. The market will change and evolve, and so will your customer needs. And make sure that you're attuned to that so that you're delivering the right things at the right time as part of that planning. Okay, so third myth, this one drives me a little bit crazy, that planning is just Marcom's job.
Oh, you know what? I alluded to it a little bit earlier when we were talking about strategy, but if you're developing an annual marketing plan and you don't have sales and product development and customer experience and customer service and operations at the table to talk about those bigger business priorities, it's all being developed in silo. I often use this idea of we're all packing for a trip, but we all picked a different destination and we're all surprised we didn't end up in the same country at the end. And that's kind of what's going to happen here. It's a huge pitfall. It's something a lot of people do. But, if you have product working on its own timeline and sales chasing after completely different things and then marketing doing different things, we can't really expect it to have the impact on the business priorities that we want it to have.
I could not have said it better. And I think that's also why a lot of great plans never make it to action, right? Because a lot of them are created in silo and you're not getting that kind of diverse perspective. And, I've talked about this a lot before, but especially your sales team. That is a gold mine of insights, right? They're talking to your customers, your clients every single day. And so making sure that you're not only, listening to the insights and what they have to say when it comes to their experience in the field, but what can we make happen? What can we actually do with the teams that we have? What can we actually accomplish? We also don't want to set together a plan that is far beyond anything that we can do, right? We want it to be achievable. And so bringing all of those different minds to the table so that we can create a strong plan forward is really the best way.
100%. And I think, those teams work together to create the plan, or in an ideal case scenario, that's what we'd like to see, those teams coming together to do that. And then defining, the what, the how, the why, where are we working together? Where are things that one team is doing impacting what another team might do and things like that. It also helps in operationalizing that plan later on. Otherwise, it's just going to be a plan on paper. If marketing has developed it and then they're the ones executing it, they don't really feel the need to communicate it with everybody. But by creating it with everybody else, you're also creating a situation where everybody understands it, everybody knows what role they're playing, everybody knows what impact they're going to have against those business goals together. And so we are clear on how we're measuring success and what success looks like and all those things. And we have an easier time, operationalizing it across the organization.
I would also say everyone's also accountable for those goals, right? So when you align from the beginning, you have more of that accountability as you move through together, sharing insights, sharing success, sharing results, sharing challenges, right? To help each other down the road so that you're all, to your point, working towards that same goalpost.
Yes, and by having marketing taking that approach to the development of their plan, they're also, again, moving away from being seen as that marketing services team and really being seen as a strategic driver of the business. One that understands how all these different functions impact what they're doing and vice versa, how what they're doing impacts the other functions, so that working in tandem together is seen as a strategic exercise and not just, the team that will create a sell sheet, a branded sell sheet for them.
Okay, let's dig into our last myth, which I know is going to get you. The last myth, that measurement isn't necessary.
This drives me nuts. I think, unfortunately, what we see is that a lot of organizations and teams still think that proof of activity alone demonstrates impact. oh, I wrote 10 blogs this year and I, sent X amount of emails. And yeah, that's not enough.
Which is always good to know. We want to know the measurement there, but really it's about whether the goals are tied to business outcomes. Because if they're not, then how are leaders going to know that what we're doing is truly valuable for the success of the business?
100%. And, if I can build on that, it's not just about measurement, but it's also the type of measurement. I think too often we see KPIs, clicks or open rates or things like that, looked at as measurements for marketing success or impact. And those are great campaign performance indicators, but if we are tying everything to our business strategy, which we are, we need to look at what the impact of marketing on those greater business priorities are. So, market share, profits, revenue, those are the types of things. And those are the kinds of conversations that we need to be making, because that's what, leaders at the top want to see, how much I invested in marketing and what the impact of that was on the business itself.
So I know something a lot of people are thinking, and something that we struggle with a lot in this industry is that it is not a simple industry to track in building materials. We work through a to and through model most often. And so you're not measuring direct sales. You're working through distributors, through dealers. You may be marketing to contractors, to builders, to DIYers to help those sales, but you don't always have a line of sight into how they're purchasing, what they're purchasing, and how to draw that back.
No, you're totally right. I think, we see this in building materials. We see this in a lot of, highly complex and highly regulated or B2B industries where that attribution to sale is really tricky and challenges, because often we as marketers, but also the organization sometimes doesn't have that visibility into that kind of last bit of that buyer journey, which is, we've captured the leads, we've nurtured them, we shared them with sales. Sales was able to, continue that cycle for us. And then at some point, our visibility and our ability to see what happens with that lead drops with the distributor, the dealer, depending on the relationships we have. We also have some challenges with the way that tools are used. We have amazing tools, CRMs and things like that. Unfortunately, if there isn't an enterprise-wide commitment to using them, but also how they are used and having some consistency in that, we're also struggling with accurate data when it comes to that.
So, I have to get us to dig a little bit further on that, because we know it's challenging. We know that drawing those lines is pretty impossible sometimes in this building materials industry. So how should we be measuring? What should we be looking at?
I mean, that's a great question. And it's the $1 million question, isn't it? If we had it solved, we wouldn't be here. I think it's looking at it twofold. There's some long-term strategies we can put in place. So certainly we want to look at our tools and our tech and our processes and commitments and engagements on the part of the team and come up with a long-term solution so that we can close that attribution gap. But in the short term, we can also just be really clear and honest with each other. As long as everybody's on the same page and we all understand and agree to the limitations that we have and start thinking about what are some of the proxy metrics we can look at in order to close that gap for ourselves. And again, recognizing that 100% attribution isn't possible, we can look at things like dealer program participation or specification of our product in kind of projects, looking at on-shelf share, how much of that do we own, and working with our partners to understand that. And that's really kind of where we can start agreeing on what those proxy metrics are, start connecting the dots, and start working towards that 100% attribution model.
Okay, so that seems a little complex, as we know. So how about an example of that? So what's an example of how we might, not get around, but figure out a way that we can actually see our work come to life and see how we're finding that success that a client needs?
Well, I think to your point, our sales teams really know their customers. And I think that's where working hand in hand with sales is really interesting for a lot of these organizations. That's why in building materials, you see a lot of account-based marketing or ABM approaches, highly targeted programs, pilot tests with a smaller group, whatever you want to call it. But if you know who you're talking to and who your leads are from the get-go, down to their names, their contact information, all that great stuff, and you create something very personalized for them, you have the ability to track the success and the performance of what you're putting out there all the way to the end. And by demonstrating the success of a pilot program or an account-based marketing program, you're then able to get the buy-in from your leadership team to start expanding it to a larger group where you might not know who the leads are, but you've proven that the tactics and the process and the approach has worked with that smaller group.
So basically what we're saying is we're not chasing perfection, but it's more about alignment and agreement, right? To make sure at the outset, we're all in agreement about what can be tracked, what success will look like, and making sure that even as we may be adapting throughout the year, that we're re-looking at our goals, at how we're measuring and what we're able to do, and kind of looking at that across the teams.
And that's exactly it, because if marketing and the leadership team and all the other teams can align on those metrics early, it's really then showing that marketing isn't just about proving activity. It's really about proving the impact that it has on driving that growth for the business, even if it's a challenging channel marketing kind of environment.
So we've gone through all 4 of our myths. And I think if we take a step back, it's really about understanding that annual planning isn't about doing more. And it's not about doing more than you did last year or the year before. It's about doing the right things, right? So it's about aligning with your strategy, aligning with your teams, bringing perspectives together, making the right choices, making the strategic choices that are going to drive that short-term and long-term growth. And it's about measuring what matters so that you can make sure that you're seeing that success.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. You used the word choices. I think that's what strategy is all about. It's about making those choices. What are we going to do? What are we not going to do? Or what are we maybe not going to do right now? And that's okay. It's, about allocating our resources to where they're going to make the most impact. It gives leaders confidence that we know what we're doing and that we are actually driving measurable results against their business outcomes. It's about making sure that we are leveraging budget in an appropriate manner. And at the end of the day, it's really about shifting from looking at annual planning as just something you have to do and looking at it as a true growth engine for your business.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Kamila, for joining us. I think it's been a great discussion to really uncover a lot of those myths and talk about what teams need to be doing as we head into annual planning. And thanks, everyone, for listening.